Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and bring up our next speaker. This is Ryan Schroer, and he is with Missouri Feeds. And Ryan is going to talk about ruminant nutrition, specifically in exotics. If you don't know Missouri, they're a feed manufacturer. They're all over the place, nationwide, maybe globally, I would assume. They provide lots of feed to zoos all over the United States, but they also provide lots of feed for what we do. So I'll introduce you to Ryan.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody for letting me be here today. I'm also really impressed. Brian managed to eat peel and eat shrimp in a white shirt and still have a white shirt, because I would not have a white shirt had I had peel and eat shrimp in the white shirt. So today, my job is to teach you about nutrition and exotics. We're going to see how it goes. I will not make you an expert, because I'm not an expert, but I'm better than your average bear. How do we get it to forward? There we go. So who's talking to you? I'll tell you about me. I'm Ryan Schroer. I'm working on my PhD right now at the University of Arkansas. My PhD is actually in parasites involving giraffe, so we can talk about that later if you want. I do have a master's in ruminant nutrition from Purdue. I did my bachelor's there, and I've spent a period of time working through different industries on the cattle side of the business. I did spend a little bit of time in human pharmaceuticals, don't hold that against me. And then I also ran a small farm, so I am familiar with small ruminants. I raised my own small ruminants in the northeast of the U.S., but kind of had a vast variety of experiences. Who is Missouri? So, fun fact, we're owned by Land O'Lakes. Land O'Lakes is the butter company, the same company that you can get stuff at the store. We also own Winfield Crop Solutions. And then we have a sister company, so Purina. How many people have your local Purina dealer? Your local Purina dealer is a great group of people. We're kind of sisters with Purina. A lot of times I work very closely with them, so Land O'Lakes owns us both. Quick fact, Purina is not Purina. So if you have a dog or cat eating Purina feed, that's not me. We only work with cows, horses, sheep, goats, and exotics. So just so you know, we are different. So who is Missouri? Missouri Exotic Animal Nutrition was started in 1989. And we are the #1 trusted zoo brand in the world. We have pretty stringent quality control. As a matter of fact, our manufacturing is so high quality control in the plants that Missouri operates in that we can export internationally, and we can work with the National Institute of Health for research. So our stuff is so certified that we produce our laboratory diets as well for the National Institute of Health. We have 3 PhD nutritionists that all come from zoo backgrounds. We have 2 master's level nutritionists, not including myself. And then we do all of our research within facilities. So believe it or not, if you know Purina really well, or you had cattle, Purina has a research farm in Gray Summit, Missouri. We do not have rhinoceros there. We do not have kudu. We do not have eland there. But we do all of our research at places like your farm. We'll find a research partner and we'll develop our diets there. Let's get to work. What is a ruminant? And ruminants are really these magical things, right? So they take cellulitic material out of a plant and they take it down their esophagus, and then it goes into their rumen, where something really crazy happens, and it makes food for this 1,200, 1,400, 1,500, 3,000 pound animal, right? Or 800, or however big of an animal you have. But it can take something that you and I can't digest and make food. The way that it does that, we have to stop thinking about I'm feeding a black buck or I'm feeding a giraffe, and change our mindset. I'm feeding a microbe. I'm feeding a fungi, because these microbes are what actually take those cellular plant walls and they make food for the animal. They produce volatile fatty acids, and those volatile fatty acids are changed into energy for those animals. So from now on out, when I talk to you about feeding, we're feeding a microbe. So what do we know about exotic ruminants? So we classify those exotic ruminants into some different types. These are more what you would consider standard ruminants here in the U.S. So at the top, we'll see concentrate selectors. So how many people have heard the word browser? Browsers are concentrate selectors. And then you have intermediate types. So these types are like, I don't really care whether I'm browsing or I'm grazing. And there's certain animals within that fall into that category. And then we have grass or roughage eaters. And those would be your cow type animals, your sheep. Your browsers would be more your goat type animals, or those intermediate selector type animals. Well, what about African animals? So we classified, they did this back in 1973, they classified many of your popular African animals based on the type of flora that they would consume. So as you can see, again, anytime you see concentrate selectors, we're going to look at browsers. You see some of your dikers, your bushbuck, your intermediate types, your impalas, Thompson's gazelle, Grant's gazelles, grass or roughage eaters, the African buffalo, the water buck. And then there's a second page that I wanted you all to see. Again, concentrate selectors, giraffe, lesser kudu, greater kudu. Those are all animals that when I talk about starch or I talk about grains in a diet, I'm going to think extra hard before I put starch into those concentrate selectors. So what's starch, Ryan? Or what's this concentrate you're talking about? That's the feed that we make. And starch is the ingredient that comes in things like molasses, corn, wheat. It's a sugar. It's something that can be rapidly fermented. We also added a few species in there, so if you take notes or you see those notes, those species are added in there. The only thing I will say, the roan and the sable, we might move them more towards an intermediate, but Dr. Mike Schlegel made these slides, and I'm absolutely not going to overrule him today. So, originally exotic ruminants were fed like cattle. We had no clue that they were any different, right? We had cattle, we thought, I can feed that, it's a ruminant, I'll do it to my giraffe too, all right? But in the early 1980s, or mid-1980s, 1987, Dr. Ulray realized, hey, we have a lot of issues with these exotic ruminants in these zoos, and they're dying earlier than they die in the wild. That's a problem, right? There's no predators, there's no lions. Why are we killing these animals earlier than they die in the wild? So our first product that we ever made is ADF16. It's still around. And the reason we made that was to reduce some of the starch from what we would consider a feedlot diet. We don't recommend that. We've learned now that we need to even be more careful with some of these animals, especially with our giraffids and bongo, some of those really concentrate sensitive animals. We need to be a little bit more careful. And the reason being is we've started to see some issues. You see a kidney up there. Giraffe especially are known for getting uroliths, so they, what will happen is they'll get stones and then it'll block their urinary passage and they die. Chronic wasting disease, we have some ruminal acidosis issues. It's fairly common across them when we feed those a high starch diet or a high concentrate diet. And we figured all that out in about 2005. So we've moved from 1987, 2 years after I was born, all the way up to 2005, which is the year after I graduated high school. We're starting to make some progress. So, there we go. So what happens? So why does this cause a problem? So we have bacteria, and that bacteria eats carbohydrates when we feed those starchy starchy things. Those starchy items cause gases, acids, and those volatile fatty acids and lactic acid come from those starch bacteria. And then that leads to more bacteria. So what happens? Basically, the bacteria that eat those starches, we have different types of bacteria in the rumens of these animals, and the bacteria that eat those starches produce lactic acid, and that drops the rumen pH, okay? So when we drop the rumen pH, we get something called acidosis. There we go. We've heard the name before, we didn't understand why. Those bacteria drop the rumen pH and create acidosis. One time, no big deal, all right? Well, guess what happens? If you continually do that, the bacteria that like to eat all the cellular material, the plant material, they go, I don't like it in here anymore. And they stop growing. And we start to change the bacterial population of the stomach, of the rumen, of that animal. And so these African species are much more sensitive to those starchy foods than what your cows would be. And so what we ultimately end up doing is creating subclinical rumen acidosis and changing their bacterial population. That's why Missouri has designed some of the feeds that we do.
What time frame does that happen?
So acidosis can happen within hours of eating, but long-term bacterial population change usually happens within 2 weeks. And that's why also if I change your diet, I'm going to recommend a 2-week transition because it takes 2 weeks. Again, excessive acid production encourages the wrong bacteria. So what's the problem with that? So the wrong diet equals long-term rumen damage. So on your left, this is what a good, healthy rumen should look like on the inside. Long, fat fingers, looks like a shag carpet from the 70s. It has increased surface area because there's actually blood vessels that go up in that shag carpet, and that's what absorbs all the good stuff into the body of the animal. What happens if I feed a high starch diet? Those are actually what those used to be. They get burnt off, so they become blunt, and those short blended papilla happen when I feed a high starch, low fiber diet. But here's the real issue. Long term, we get what's called keratinization. So right here, that's keratin that's beginning to form if I do that for a long period of time, and all of a sudden I've got animals that can no longer absorb anything. And so we're actually running into that right now with many of our zoo house giraffe. I work with them quite a bit, especially the oldest ones. They have long-term ruminal damage from the old diets before we knew any better. And as they age, they can't keep up. And so we begin to run into rumen issues with them and body condition score and health issues. It ultimately causes what's called ruminal parakeratosis.
You said non-reversible?
Non-reversible. Once we've ruined it, yeah, it's there. Sorry, I'm trying to make this work.
What would be an example of the wrong diet? In other words, so when you're talking about eating the wrong diet, results in acidosis.
Yeah.
You can elaborate on.
Yeah.
What does that mean specifically?
So, high corn diets. So, we're feeding a lot of corn. That's no bueno. High molasses diets. If you got a sweet feed, it's really not what I would recommend. We're going to get a little bit further into this on how I recommend across diets, because you're telling me I can't feed my pen of 50 black buck a high starch diet. We're going to talk a little bit about how I parse it out at your farm. But ultimately, what I want you to begin to think about is how you capture the value on some of the animals at your facility. So to me, a kudu is worth more than a black buck. To me, a giraffe is worth more than a kudu. So those are how I begin to separate the animals, and that's how I begin to help you pick out which feed to use. Because we have a variety. Missouri and Purina together, we have a variety of options that you can use. The higher starch diets are generally lower cost because corn is cheap. And we can put some of that into some of those animals and do okay. And then we have low starch diets that don't use corn, they use wheat midds and things like that to help the animal. Those diets are more expensive, and we have to understand the spread. What ultimately happens too, high starch, low fiber diets, those are bacteria. We lose spots where the bacterial colonize, so you'll actually lose bacterial colonization if you feed the wrong diet to the wrong animal. We're going to move on from ruminant physiology for a second because that's just super exciting. I'm sure you're all just enthralled, and you just spent the whole entire time eating, and now you're ready to ruminate and go take a nap like an animal, like we're going to go lay in the shade and take a nap. We're going to move on a little bit from that. I do want to talk about Some of the seasonal changes in nutrient requirements as a stage of life changes, and the reason I wanted to do this was because it's a nice fast forward through some of the things you might ask me about. There's different life stages: maintenance, growth, pre-breeding, breeding, gestation, lactation. I wanted to share some charts on that. So nutrients do change with reproduction. How many people think that it takes a lot of nutrients to gestate an animal? It doesn't take a lot of nutrients to gestate an animal. Actually, we can see it. So maintenance is right here. These are the energy, and over there's the protein. Here's maintenance. Here's early gestation. It doesn't take that much more than maintenance to keep her healthy and happy. Late gestation. She's getting ready to have a baby. It doesn't take that much more energy and protein when she's getting ready to have a baby, barring that she's in good condition. Early lactation is where we start to see an increase in nutritional needs. So when you have an animal that's just gestating or late gestation, we don't have to do much until she starts nursing or right before she starts nursing. The act of lactation and nursing is the highest energy expelled that an animal will do, the highest energy tax on an animal. So if she's not lactating, she ain't pulling a lot of energy. Energy requirements change with reproduction. Again, we've got female and then a female with young in the orange. It just shows the different energy across a couple different species: buffalo, kudu, impala. Again, those energy levels do increase with various species once they have young, and I wanted to include that so you can see, because a lot of times people don't have data on buffalo, kudu, and impala. Voluntary food intake is influenced by thermal stress. How many of you have felt thermal stress today? Anybody? A little sweaty? Did y'all want to eat today? How about if we didn't have those umbrellas and left y'all sitting out in the sun? Would you want to eat today? I wouldn't want to eat today. But we're going to talk about the cool weather first. So the cool environment, 41 to 59 degrees. Does that feel very cool to you guys? 41, I mean, we're South Texas, so it might feel cool to you guys. I live in Northwest Arkansas. 41 to 59 degrees is a good day in the Ozarks. Intakes get stimulated 2 to 5%. Mild cold, 23 to 41 degrees. That's what we call a shutdown here in South Texas. Once it gets that cold, y'all are done. Those intakes get stimulated 3 to 8%. So we're going to increase their intake needs as it gets colder. Why is that? Yeah, she's got to make heat. They got to make heat. Think of that rumen as a gigantic fermentation vat. How many people have ever made sauerkraut? Do we have any good Germans here? All right, you make sauerkraut. That sauerkraut jug, that bacteria ferments and it starts to get a little bit warm in there. And that bacterial fermentation not only makes sauerkraut kind of warm, it makes these animals warm. And that fermentation is what we need to keep these animals warm outside. Cold stress. 5 to 23 degrees. Those intakes get stimulated by as much as 10% more. So you're going to see them eat as much as 10% more in their feed. Severe cold stress. We get blizzards down here. Does it get down to 8? I got 14 inches of snow one day up north. That was not fun. That's severe cold stress. At that point, we have real issues, and we can see them eat as much as 25% more just to try to maintain their metabolic energy. We're going to look at the heat. We're going to look at mild heat stress, 77 to 95 degrees. I think we have covered that today. Mild heat stress. Intake's going to be depressed for 2 to 5%, so they might back off their diet a little bit. Severe heat stress. I'm pretty sure we're going to cover that today too. Greater than 95 degrees, we're going to see a marked depression in intake, especially if you have high humidity. Somebody told me that South Texas here has high humidity. I said, y'all come on up to Bentonville. It is hot and humid up there. But we have some high humidity and solar radiation. They're gonna actually drop their intakes between 10 and 35%. But here's the thing I want you all to think about. When do you think they're gonna eat the most? Overnight. Make sure that your evening feeding has enough to get them through, because they're gonna eat overnight when the temperatures cool off. I see that quite a bit. Managing your collection. So this is one of my buddies. His name's George. He's down in Louisiana. But we talk about managing our collection. Browser. If it's a browser, to me, low starch is a must. I'm going to recommend a low starch diet on especially those high-end browsers, your bongos, your giraffes, your more valuable animals. Intermediate, I'm still going to be concerned about dietary starches, but I'm going to be a little bit more flexible, especially with costs. And then grazers have less digestive issues. I can be pretty lax with some of the grazers on what I feed them. Consider the value. The value of an animal is multifaceted, okay? Here in Missouri, one of the things we consider for value is endangered species. We actually lose money on endangered species most of the time because we make diets for animals that don't pay us. So if it's an endangered species, we might feed it differently than we do. I'm going to keep using the black buck example because they kind of breed like crazy and they go everywhere. Everybody's got a black buck. High acquisition costs. I'm sorry, but if you pay $200,000 plus for an animal and you don't think about how you're going to feed it, I might challenge you. That's the nicest way I'll put it. My personal favorite, spouse or child's favorite. How many of y'all have a bottle baby that your kids raised? Is that animal worth a little bit more to you? Yep. Ain't gonna get sold, is it? There you go. Maybe at the right price. But yeah, no, I had that. I had a sheep my daughter raised during COVID. She bottle fed the dadgum thing and thought it was her mom. I couldn't sell it. I still can't sell it. Like, I had it and I had to give it away because she would not let me sell it. There's a value to that, and there's a value with how I feed that animal, and it's just gonna be what it'll be. A couple things that I want to talk about. Water is the first nutrient. Guys, when we're having issues on your farm and we think that there's a feed problem, but the feed looks like it should be okay and you're having an issue, I'm going to look at water. I found out here in San Antonio area the water is very high in calcium, and as a result of that, it actually binds some of the other nutrients in your feed, and we have to specifically consider that when we're working through things. Hay. This is something you'll hear me say quite a bit. If you don't measure it, you can't manage it. If you don't measure it, you can't manage it. So people tell me they bought hay, but they won't spend $17 on a hay test to tell me what kind of hay they got. How's the protein in it? What's the relative feed value? How's the digestibility of that hay? It's $17. You spend all this money, get a hay test so we can measure it and balance your diet off of that. Concentrate. So anytime I say concentrate, think pelleted diet. That's what I call a concentrate. Know the fed rate. Some of my concentrates we feed at 3 to 5% of the diet. Some of my concentrates I feed up to 25% of the diet. It just depends on the diet and the animal that I'm talking about. It is our vitamin and mineral delivery system. I really don't have any other reason to feed it unless you're a hunting operation, and then it brings them all into one spot and you can shoot them. But outside of that, vitamin and mineral delivery system in your concentrate. It can bring added energy. We look at these giraffes. Everybody see them? They're out in the snow. They're in thermal stress. I need added energy. I can bring added energy with the concentrate. I can use starch, so corn. I can use corn, but I've already told you I don't recommend corn. Well, how's Missouri do it? We do it with fat. We add energy with fat. We can get up to a certain percentage of fat and utilize that for added energy. It does have limitations. I can't get over 6% or it'll upset the rumen bacteria, but 6% is usually enough to get me through. In emergencies, some diets are complete feeds and can be used without hay. With hay is preferred, but I have had emergencies where a ranch will call me and say, this is all I've got. Can we use that for a day or two until the hay truck shows up? 100%, we can get you by. We can get you by. Know your team. There's a lot of guys up there that wear a lot of different hats and a lot of different brands. This is on the top, and then Colts on the side here because I ran out of room. That's your Purina team. Those are the guys that you'll see here locally in Texas quite a bit. The two guys in the middle, the one with the crocodile and myself, we cover regional levels. That's Dr. Troy Tollefson and myself. We work regionally to help you with your diets. And then on the left-hand side is Dr. Mike Schlegel. Mike works for the Purina team. So if you're feeding something like Antler Max or Purina Grazer or Purina Game Ranch feeds, Mike is responsible, and that team is responsible for that side of the business. We all help each other. We all work together. We all have each other's phone numbers, but that's your team. At that point, I'm going to thank you for your time and ask if you have any questions, and we can dig in. My only thought is if you're asking a specific question about your individual ranch that doesn't apply to everybody, let's take it offline to the side and do it one-on-one.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Let's just say you have a pasture that's 500 acres.
Yeah.
And there's a mixture of browsers and grazers in that pasture. How would Missouri address that variation as it relates to me?
Yeah, that's a super great question. So if you didn't hear Brian, he said, I got a pasture full of browsers and grazers mixed together. How do I address that from a nutritional aspect? The way I address it, I start off with what's the most valuable animal in there to you? And that's how I address it from there. Because I really run my nutrition as a business. And so if the most valuable animal in there is a browser, I'm really feeding to make sure that animal does well. If the most valuable animal in there is a grazer, then we're going to feed to the most valuable animal in there. Ideally, I would like them separated out to, that's the browser pen with all my kudu or all my bongo, and but that's not real life. And so I have to do the best that I can. Sometimes I feed my browsers a little less nice because there's more grazers in there and the feed cost would be too high. So I have to be cognizant, and I have to come up with compromises. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you talked about doing this, we have a minute. What do you think it would be a valuable tool to do some fecal sampling to see what may be there? Is that what y'all do?
Are you talking about fecal sampling for parasites, or are you talking about fecal sampling for
For
nutrition?
nutrition.
We don't do any of that with Missouri at this point, because you're only getting a part of the picture, right? Because the fecal sample is what goes in minus what comes out in the urine minus what the animal absorbs. That's the fecal that's left. So you're still making a few guesses. I don't do that as a recommendation. We don't do that, but we do try to balance for what goes in, and then we observe with our eyes for what comes out, if we can get eyes on it. I've just been to South Texas, to some of the ranches down here. I realize observing with your eyes is often challenging, but we can still do it. Yes, sir.
On your browsers versus grazers, is it okay to go one direction versus not the other? Like grazers like browsers and they'll do okay? Or is it you feed a browser like a grazer, you're going to have those issues like you talked about?
I would feed a grazer like a browser. I can feed anything wild herbivore, which is kind of our high-end browser. I can feed anything that diet. I don't know that I would feed a giraffe ADF 16 or a ranch grazer. I wouldn't recommend it. Can we get... Sorry guys, my son keeps calling me on his FaceTime. He's 7. I keep ignoring him. I would not feed a browser like a grazer. I would feed the browser side of it better. The grazer can get along with the browser food.
You know, it's fairly common when buying a giraffe, particularly from the zoo, that the zoo will send you with a bulk of the feed that they've been feeding. So you either keep using the same feed or you maybe transition to something different over time. So as rangers, we're buying animals from lots of different places. So as an example, if you buy meal guy from deep South Texas, they're not eating on feeders, they're just eating grass.
Yeah.
And you bring them into the hill country. Could you talk a little bit about, you know, what we should do or what we should look for when we're in that process of transition? Because, you know, we're not getting a cow feed from the people we're buying animals from, and we don't even know what they're doing in most cases. So how would you recommend addressing transition number 1 and number 2 what signs are there that during the process of transition, the animal is no longer successfully ruminating? In other words, you see them at the feeder, you see them eating, but they're actually not getting the benefit of the nourishment from what they're eating because it's so different from what they were eating before. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so he left me with a hard situation, right? I'm getting nilgai from South Texas that have been grazing on grass, and I just brought them up here to the hill country, and there is nothing to do. So how do I transition them? So ideally, I'm going to start with Ryan's ideal world, right? That's the make-believe. Ideally, I'm going to keep them somewhere where I can kind of see them and kind of get them transitioned. It takes I recommend transitions over about 28 days for a diet change. The reality is you're not going to be able to do that. You're going to kick them nilgai out and they're going to disappear into the brush, and you might see them if you bump them. So what am I going to be able to look at? Well, I can't probably see the nilgai anymore. If I do see it, I want to look to see if it is ruminating. I do want to see if it looks gone, right, above its rumen. So you got its hooks, those are the hip bones, and you got a rumen, and there's a triangle there that if they're not eating really well will get really gone. I'm going to see that. But what's something that we all see that's left all over our pastures from these animals that I do want to look at and kind of take a look at as I'm driving around those pastures? They leave it everywhere. Poop. I'm a nutritionist. I'm going to look at shit all day. So if I see a bunch of runny, loose fecals, that's when I'm going to start to say, hey, we got a problem. It's just like a cow, right? If you turn a grass cow out on fresh grass and she leaves me a whole bunch of loose patties, I know that she's not ruminating optimally. If I turn a feedlot steer who had solid patties or solid pellets, if you're thinking, sheep, goats, or hoof stock here, and all of a sudden they're leaving me diarrhea splotches, something's happened in their rumen, and we've got to keep a closer eye on them. I would say you could leave out bicarb licks. There's no problem with it. There's no harm in it. But I'm also going to tell you that many of them won't eat it because their palates are not conditioned to it and they won't eat it. So that's frustrating for me. I can tell you, going from the hoofstock side of cattle and that'll eat anything to the exotic side, it's very challenging, especially with what you guys do. So I commend you because it's really challenging, especially with the animals that you bring from places. If you are buying from somebody or if you are selling to somebody, I highly ask that you either get the diet from them, if they have a diet, or what are you feeding? Just let me know what you're feeding. And if you're selling to somebody and you can send them the diet, hey, we were feeding this, just send it along with them so they at least know. And their nutritionist can say, okay, it's coming from eating Record Rack and I'm going to put it on Antler Max. Or it's coming from, Wild Herbivore. Can I get Wild Herbivore and put it on Wild Herbivore? Can I put it on ADF16? So be kind to the people you sell to, and if you can, send the diet. You don't have to send a sample, but at least tell them what you're feeding in your feeders. Yes, sir.
What do you feel like is more important? The compound pellet that you're representing, or the hay?
So I love hay quality. I really think it's a ruminant, right? I need fiber, and I need good fiber. From the get-go, my pellet is to bring vitamins and minerals. The rest of that nutrition, those bacteria cling to the hay, cling to the villi of the rumen. They need lots of hay, and they need good quality hay. And so I always recommend good quality hay. That's of utmost importance right under water. So water, hay, pellet.
Like people get their hay RFD tested or tested for quality, that's all you're looking for, right?
I'm sorry, I have a hard time hearing.
People getting their hay tested for like RFD and protein, things like that, that's all really important also.
Yeah, I really recommend it because if not, you're kind of shooting in the dark and you're looking at it on the truck saying that's good quality hay. And I've seen good quality hay test everywhere from 14% crude protein to 22% crude protein. So, what's what?
And like the RFD of the hay is kind of what negates that initial, like you showed that giraffe interior where it had all those nodules built up, right? That's what causes that, is a non or a low.
The nodules?
Yeah.
Like the parakeratosis?
Yeah.
Actually, the the corn and the starches cause that. So the hay is just gonna provide scratch factor and protein to that animal. So you can't really mess up the rumen with hay. As a matter of fact, if you have a really, really sick animal that's gone off feed, I recommend high quality, good scratch factor hay. Not super hot, like alfalfa, but just good quality hay. And a lot of times I can get that animal transition through that rumen upset. And I've done it several times with deer. I get a deer that's been fed too much concentrate, and I get it just on hay and get it through that rumen upset, and then we bring the concentrate back after a period of time. So hay is kind of my great fixer, because in the wild they don't eat concentrate. So
And one of the other, I don't know if it's a debate or it's just a preference, but I think lots of landowners do this differently. Either they offer free choice feed, animals can eat all the time, or they have their feeders set on timers, and they're feeding at certain times of the day. Ruminant nutrition standpoint, is one better than the other? Is one more detrimental than the other? Or do the animals just simply self-regulate based on the temperature?
So the way I prefer it, I prefer multiple feedings throughout, multiple small meals throughout the day. But when you have 100% access to feed all day long, they tend to self-regulate themselves also. But what I don't want to see is somebody that's feeder only kicks on twice a day, because then they just come in and gorge. And when they gorge, that's when the acid production spikes and the rumen pH drops. So even if you're gonna set your timers 4, 5, 6 times a day when it kicks out, that's great. The more frequently we can feed, the better. So in a zoo, when I'm talking to people, I tell them, can you feed the giraffe at a minimum 3 times a day? Can you feed them 4 times a day? So I try to get upwards of 4 feedings a day. With a timed feeder that's kicking things out, I don't know how many time settings a day you can have, but more frequently is better. That way they don't get set that at 7 a.m. I'm going to go to this pile and I'm going to gorge myself because I'm the alpha male or the alpha female in that group, and I need to get every piece of that I can. So he's going to gorge and make his belly hurt. That was the question back there, I believe, somewhere.
Well, yeah, on the last slide, you said something about fats, with the grass or
Yeah,
smellers or whatever it was.
fats.
What about like peanuts and stuff?
So I don't use peanuts because we don't balance for peanuts. I use fats in the pellet. I don't typically feed peanuts just because it adds also other stuff that I don't work with. So not that I don't work with it, it's just we don't know what's in them. So I don't know that you're also adding protein. So another thing that I'm always worried about with these guys, how many people have ever had trouble with long hooves? Long hooves? I was just on a ranch the other day where somebody was trimming hooves. If you're trimming hooves, they're getting a lot of protein, and that protein will lead to slipper hooves. So we want to back down that protein level. These guys don't need a lot of protein. They don't need a lot of protein at all. I mean, I'm balancing diets at maintenance at 12% protein on some of these animals. We can get upwards of 14% to 15, 16% if they're lactating and actively reproducing, but they don't need a lot of protein. So peanuts do bring protein. No, don't need to. Unless you're growing racks. Are you growing racks? That's a different story. That's a different game.
What about fats for the car? I've been told that the higher fat content will put on a little more bone quicker.
I don't do anything with rack species. So I don't do any of that would be like our Antler Max crew. I only do the exotics. So the racks shed off every year. I don't do anything with racks. And it's just me not knowing because I don't spend enough time with them. So.
The one like what side you keep the protein down to
Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't worry about feeding them. Yep, she'll be fine.
What about rumor additives, and do you use something besides Safeguard, and how do you apply those?
Oh man, we're getting into the parasite talk. I'm gonna need a drink. So here's the deal, guys. I've examined now, I'm at 25 giraffe across 4 different zoos, and over half of them, that's the zoos on my study. And I know there are more zoos in the U.S. because they call me all the time. We have a huge safeguard, which is fenbendazole. We have a huge fenbendazole resistance issue right now. Basically, we can't dose the animals effectively enough with fenbendazole. However, you're going to ask me, well, what do you recommend, parasite guy? I'm going to tell you, I don't have a good solution because I recommend oral cydectin. It's my next gun in my gun belt. Here's the problem. How many of you guys want to go catch 75, you want to go catch 75 kudu and orally dose them? It ain't gonna happen. So I was just spent yesterday with Kevin Robertson, who's in here somewhere hiding, because he's laughing at me going, we spent all day talking about how are we going to dose these exotics effectively, right? So I need the right dose into the right animal at the right time. How am I going to dose those animals effectively? And as an industry, we haven't tackled that successfully enough. And that's why I started my PhD. And what I've come to the conclusion is there aren't a lot of really great options right now. And I don't know the best way to recommend you.
What about boron? Have you ever tried those?
A what?
Like the cyclic boron or anything like that?
Yeah, so there is some studies on the poron. The efficacy goes down excessively with the poron. The only study I can cite off the top of my head, there's a cydectin study using oral cydectin and poron cydectin in giraffe. And the poron cydectin had less efficacy by a lot, and it actually worked a shorter duration of time than it would for a cow. So something in the giraffe's body metabolizes those porons quicker, and that's why I don't recommend them. I've seen them used, but again, right dose, right time, right animal, it's still, a poron's not effective unless you've got the animal down. And we're talking about injectables, darting animals. There's not a lot of great options right now, but I will tell you, if you're a consistent safeguard user, here's what I do recommend. If you're going to use safeguard pellets, before you use safeguard pellets, I want you to take an aggregate fecal, and I want you to take the freshest samples you can find in a pen. So I want you to go, and I want you to take the piles, and I want you to collect some feces, and I want you to put them in a bag. And I want you to stick that bag immediately in the fridge, and I want you to take it to your vet, and I want you to run a fecal on it. And then we're going to get a fecal egg count. If the fecal egg count's where your vet suggests that you should treat, we're gonna treat them, and then we're gonna wait 14 to 21 days. And at the end of 14 to 21 days, we're gonna take another fecal. Do the same thing, go out in the paddock, we're gonna pick the freshest piles, and we're gonna pick just the poop off the top of the freshest piles. And we're gonna test it again. And if we didn't get 95% reduction, we have a resistance issue. And we need to start thinking about something else in our toolbox. Because here's what's happened as an industry. We've poured safeguard on them because, well, they look kind of wormy and I don't know what else to do. But what we've created is a monster that we can't beat. And it's becoming, the reality is we can beat it, but your management is going to increase significantly. And it's going to be more hands-on work. Yes, sir.
Do you think utilizing like a Falacha card whenever you do have your hands on the animal, that you think that would?
I would love it.
Just worming just a worm?
Absolutely. I'd love a FAMACHA type scoring system. The problem is I can't validate it across all the different species. And some of the species, their membranes are black. I learned that because I was like, can we use a FAMACHA card on a giraffe? Well, some of the giraffe I can touch, some of them I can't. But their membranes are black. So you can't see if it's pink or white or pale. And I said, well, can we try their vulva? And they said, do you want to die? So you can look at, sometimes you can peel, open their vulva a little bit and see if it's pale or if it's dark pink. But again, I don't have a validated scoring system for all the different species. But shoot, yes, man, I would love a way for people to say, yeah, this animal's sick, I want to treat this animal versus treating a pen of 75, but we got to be practical, right? I don't want to come up here and you guys be like, that kid has no clue what he's talking about. we got to be practical in our management, and that's going to be really intensive. Yes, sir.
Yes, on some feeders, a feeder that drops into a trough system or a feeder that drops into the ground. Any difference between them?
Absolutely. Parasites can't climb troughs, and parasites can't climb trees. So as long as they didn't shit in the trough, or you clean the trough out, you know, that's a whole lot better system. Now granted, there are other things that can happen, right? They're gonna step in the trough and break a leg. You're gonna call me and be mad about that. Because if it can happen, Murphy's Law, it will happen. But I'm just telling you, anytime I can get that animal to not eat off the ground, we've reduced parasite load. Thank you all for your time. I'm available the rest of the day.